Okay, then it's my turn. Yeah, Hans? Would you? Of course. All right. No, I'll conclude. Go ahead. Oh, here, take this one.
The question that I was thinking about as you were talking, which I wanted to ask you, is quite simply, do you think that there are losers from globalization? Because you seem to suggest that there aren't.
No, I don't want to suggest that there are none and that everything is something to be applauded. I think what I wanted to show, I mean, certainly those who lose jobs because someone made a decision to change operational location to elsewhere, they are losing, certainly in the short term. Okay, and what I've learned here today is that there's a clear distinction to be made between the macro and the micro. I hesitate to use the word economics because I don't have enough economic know-how, but basically the aggregated effect and the micro effect. So a worker who loses a job in Detroit, and certainly at a certain age, will never recover, and that whole community and those families and those dependent suppliers and services will all suffer, they lose. And whether reskilling can ever occur quickly enough for them to re-participate in a newly configured system, no, experience shows that is not, that's not always likely. Okay, what I have seen is that there clearly are a lot of winners, and that over a long period of time, a certain kind of economic logic will prevail. And that the response to the losers in Detroit from the US politics to say, okay, we're going to start proudly making in the US, I am quite convinced that that is the wrong response, that will not produce winners. My fear is more that kind of unqualified, populist, and illogical, I mean basically ignorant of the real logic behind supply chain configuration and design, that will actually produce more losers. I guess that's what I wanted to say. And it's good that you pointed it out, because I'm certainly not here to glorify anything. And you know, I appreciated your remarks, because there are losers, and you know, when my colleagues lost their jobs, or I've seen CEOs move certain parts of their operations from Switzerland to Thailand, there were losers. Yeah, and we regretted it. And lucky for the Swiss that there was a safety net, that there was public health care, that there are free schools, that there is enough riches in that country to receive these people, and many of them were retrained in that case. But certainly in Detroit, I think that did not happen, and that's why I think government should work, or policymakers should work to make sure that there are robust social systems in place, so that people don't fall off the map, and that you end up with a catastrophic social consequence of these. I guess I wanted to say that you can't have politicians deciding where factories will be. It doesn't work. You'll get poorer in the long run.
Thank you, Bublu. I'll just follow up on the idea of winners and losers of some of the trends that we're now experiencing. And the question is for you, Roger. As you said, there are powerful nations, or powerful entities, to be more general, that are setting up the rules. To what extent can a small open economy such as the Czech Republic become a game changer, or one of those powers that will essentially determine the rules to an extent that it is beneficial to them?
There's no easy answer to this. I think small economies have always been in a difficult situation, and both my other colleagues on the platform have indicated the power structures that take place. And despite Bublu's protestations, it's perfectly possible for rational decisions taken within the context of systems to be political. Knowing that you are acting in a power context is not necessary for you actually to be acting in a power context. And it's really important for us to acknowledge that, both on a theoretical and a practical sense. But also, as Hans has spoken, what we've actually seen, especially in this part of the world over the past 20 years, has been the extension of the reconstruction of a particular form of imperial power on that basis. So small nations have a limited options. However, the first step surely comes from the kind of knowledge that Bublu and Hans have been talking about. Once you identify the structures that you are actually in, changing that relationship depends upon understanding the logics which those structures actually work on, and on that basis. Now, Rome's question is a very difficult one, because how you become leaders, and I guess it's picking up on both of what my colleague said. It's finding a niche. Because one of the key lessons I've learned, much to my cost, because I've written a lot in international theory and stuff like that, is actually I need to stop thinking in aggregates. I need to disaggregate. And in a sense, both of my colleagues have made the point that you can't meaningfully talk in the same way. I mean, there are circumstances where you can talk about the Czech national economy, but you've actually got to take it beyond this and disaggregate. And my sense would be, as a political economist, looking at what that disaggregation tells us, where the Czech Republic is, and what particular advantages it has, not just in the global value chain of production, and which really rightly says is actually, it's about knowledge. It's the value of knowledge. And I know our previous speakers this morning have been going on about that, and it's easier to talk about than achieve, as to what is the appropriate knowledge. On the other hand, it is a move which is done, first of all, in the recognition of the appropriate structures, maybe in conjunction, for example, with other states. I was interested in another government conference that took place in Prague earlier this week, which is the Visegrad meeting of the defense ministers of the 4 countries that make up the Visegrad Agreement to develop high technology for radar defenses, which unfortunately ended in, I think, not much agreement. And that could have been a political way for the Czech sector to develop in conjunction with the other Eastern European economies itself. But I'm afraid there's no magic wand on this. It's about collaboration, it's about mutual interest, but primarily it's about seeing the world, first of all, as it works, the realities of power, the realities of the networks, and then working within those. But I'm sure Bublu's got something to add to that.
Actually, I have a question for both of you, and so I need your help on this. What I've heard also in Switzerland, because Switzerland agonizes also about being too export-oriented, and Switzerland is much more export-dependent than Germany, and this is where I live. So it's a smaller country, it has no domestic demand. It's negligible. So everything it produces is for foreign demand. And so we had a conference last week in which they said, what is Switzerland's role in global value chain? So your event today is very timely. Switzerland tried to create this event 2 weeks ago. And the only question they had was that is dependence on other countries only shock transmitters? Does it only have to be negative and a source of anxiety? Is it only something where we perceive, as you said, I'm deeply uncomfortable with the imperialistic metaphor for obvious personal reasons, but also because I think it's a dangerous oversimplification to say we're being invaded by the Germans, we're being invaded by the Chinese. In the 70s and 80s, we said we're being invaded by the Japanese, they're buying up California, and then the Arabs are invading London, and so on. I deeply object to this language. My question is there something beyond shock transmission, beyond vulnerability and invasion and loss of identity?
Thank you very much. Very interesting question. Just speaking of Switzerland, I know that Nick Davis has a question, so maybe we can take more questions at once because we're almost at the end. We are actually at the end of this panel. So Nick, please.
Absolutely. It was just to pick up the very good point that Hans made about competitiveness being a dangerous obsession, which links to our careful definition of competitiveness as factors that lead to productivity. So actually in Professor Krugman's article, his point was, well, even if you're just using the word competitiveness as a funny way of saying productivity, it could lead to negative outcomes through trade wars and protectionism, through bad policy decisions, and through a focus away from domestic productivity, which accounts for the bulk of most value add in an economy. And so my challenge to the audience is, if you can come up for us with a sexy phrase better than the Global Factors of Productivity report, we'd love to consider it, because competitiveness for us is the 35-year history of these different issues. We're revising the index, and we know also that we need to keep on focusing on the positive sides, not the zero-sum rhetoric and discussion of international competition, which is how many people interpret the phrase. So I very much take that point and wanted to say that we're aware of it.
What's the price? Somebody come.
Lunch in Geneva.
Okay, excellent. Sounds good. Gentlemen, please address this question.
So, I mean, you're asking us to come up with a different word, but to measure exactly the same things. And actually, I wonder whether we are measuring the wrong things. I think that's partly your point as well. Because, for example, and this isn't exactly Krugman's point, but it seems to me that we should be thinking much more about balanced growth. That's a much more useful term, it seems to me. And this is also, this brings me to China and Germany, which are both very different. And so I think the threat, insofar as there is one, is different, and I'm going to come to that. But it seems to me that they both suffer from a problem of unbalanced growth. In one sense, they're similar, which is that they both have been too export reliant. And in a sense, what Germany is doing at the level of the Eurozone, China has been doing at the global level. There's another parallel, by the way, which is that the allegation is that Germany is the China of Europe, in the sense that in the same way as China is benefiting from an undervalued renminbi, Germany through the Eurozone is benefiting from an undervalued currency. So there are some parallels. Nevertheless, they are very, very different, it seems to me, partly because of the existence of the Eurozone. Because there, the danger from Germany, I think, for the rest of the Eurozone, it seems to me that Germany has different obligations towards the rest of the Eurozone than China does to the rest of the world, or that Switzerland does for that matter, because it has chosen to join a single currency. In fact, that single currency was to a large extent a response to the problem created by the end of the Cold War and German reunification. It wasn't quite a quid pro quo for German reunification, but it was in the context of German reunification. That creates certain obligations for Germany, it seems to me. I'll leave it there. Oh, and just finally, on your shock transmitters point, I think before 2008, we had a very, very positive view of economic interdependence. We thought that there was no downside to it at all, and that the more, for example, the more you increase capital flows, the more stability you would create. We now know that actually it also creates instability. They are also shock transmitters.
We have a question over there. A short one, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Santosh. I work for ArcelorMittal, we have a global manufacturing footprint of about 20 countries, doing business in 60 countries. Living through the recession, we have been experiencing what you have all been talking just now. The supply chain is a key factor of how we do business and how we plan our business in future. The productivity, which was just pointed out, remains a key focus for us. I mean, you can't think of a business, no matter which part of the world, without thinking of productivity. And we see that the Western Europe is at the highest level of competitiveness by productivity. They have the best productivity. We have the best labor and the best, competitiveness in terms of cost here in Eastern Europe, within European perimeter. But in productivity, we are, let's say, 50–60% of the Western Europe. The challenge for this part of the world remains to go up into the competitiveness by improving productivity per se. Similarly, in other countries also. So the challenge is, sorry, the question is, we have to do a lot of investments to come up to the value chain. And there we need a lot of direction from the government, from the industry as a partner. So there has to be a policy decision or policy framework from the government, European community, European Union side to sponsor these kind of activities. Otherwise, no matter how we discuss, we foresee, unless there is a policy framework, you will not see the grand changes coming into the competitiveness arena. And that remains very big focus. So are there any big level thought at the European level to address this kind of issues? You being researchers, do you see this kind of initiatives coming in?
Thank you.
That's the question.
Thank you very much.
Initiatives on investment. I'm not sure I have a good answer, except that there's a particular problem because Europe is obsessed with austerity at the moment, and in fact has, the Eurozone has now, and the Czech Republic, interestingly, along with the UK, has rejected this. But the only two countries that actually, I'm wrong on that. Sorry, it's banking union. I'm getting confused on with the Czech Republic. The Czech Republic did sign the fiscal compact, right?
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, in any case, the point is, it's actually very difficult, I think, now structurally for European economies to invest, to spend on investment because of the terms of the fiscal compact.
Okay.
To answer your question, I don't see adequate attention given to this. And so, and you are absolutely right, it is necessary.
Okay, last question to you, Roger. You've mentioned the sort of a need for a paradigm shift when it comes to perception of what is now perceived as a reality, but in fact is not. So perception of things. There are obviously huge barriers to things like that. Do we need yet another crisis, maybe much deeper crisis, a revolution? Or can you imagine shift towards the better understanding of what is going on at the moment, due to the process of gradual evolution? And that's going to be the end of today's panel, and most likely a very good beginning of the next one.
There's always resistance by people who view the world in a particular way, whether you call that an ideology, a conceptual framework, or even a religion, to changing that in the face of evidence to the contrary, or our understanding of the way that belief systems work. Emphasize that. But nonetheless, both our speakers today, apart from myself, have emphasized the reality that faces the Czech Republic. And the sooner I think that those people, and we'll talk about stakeholders this morning, and opinion formers and government, realize that we have to move into thinking in this way, the better. This is about enlightened self-interest. This is not about propagating and continuing particular conceptions that may give you influence or power. Because I think unless, and particularly the smaller states, do this, the quicker they do this, the quicker they can take advantage of utilizing these ideas that are built into these analyses.
Thank you very much. Rogera Tooze, Bublu Thakur-Weigold, and Hanse Kundnani. Thank you very much for a very interesting discussion, ladies and gentlemen.